On today's program, Reverend Adam Gabeli meets Doron Keidar of Cry for Zion and learns why Jerusalem is important. ICEJ Canada Arise directors Philippe and Marysa Bedard begin their testimony. And ICEJ Canada Executive Director Donna Holbrook travels to Jerusalem to meet with Canadian musician and composer Ruth Fazal. Genesis 15, verses 18 through 21. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham and said, "To your descendants I give this land, from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Kadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaites, Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites."
So I'm with my friend Doron Keidar right here in the Holy City. And Doron, he works with an organization called Cry for Zion. Zion is right behind us, is it not?
It is. It is.
The very holiest place where, or Hamakom, as they say in Hebrew, the place.
Yep.
The center, we believe, of God's plans and purposes on the earth, that heaven touched earth right here. Tell us first a little bit about this city. Why is it important? What is the significance of it to God? In a nutshell. I know that's a big thing. You write books about that stuff. But...
Right, exactly. So my father-in-law has written a book on that.
Yes.
It's a great book, Jerusalem, the Joy of the Whole Earth.
Amazing book. I recommend it.
So people can look into that, and you're going to really get a lot of the little bit of what we're talking about today. Mm-hmm. But in a nutshell, you have Jerusalem, which is the navel of the earth.
Right.
Okay? We're going to bring in some Jewish tradition here.
Yeah, no,
all right?
We want to hear it.
So the Jewish people believe that this is where Adam and Eve were created out of the very dust of the Hamakom, the Temple Mount.
Moriah.
Mount Moriah.
Yes.
And so up on Mount Moriah, on Mount Zion, the holiest place on earth, where the first and second temples stood, was the very place that we believe is where creation began from.
Right.
So that's why it's called the navel of the earth. What's also important to understand, prophetically speaking, is Jerusalem and Zion, right? These two terms that we use.
Right.
Some people out there think they know what they're talking about, but quite honestly, they don't. They don't understand the Hebrew language enough, and so they kind of have different versions of ideas.
Right.
But the biblical understanding, the Jewish understanding of Jerusalem, is both the earthly Jerusalem and the heavenly Jerusalem. So in other words,
right. Is it only the city that has like it's multiple in its name? Like
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It's the only capital in the world, the only city in the world that both has a physical reality and a spiritual reality that mirrors it. And so that's why we use the term for Jerusalem, the final term, because there was a whole genesis of the city of Shalem and Yerushalem and so on. And then it became Jerusalem as we know it today, Yerushalayim, with the plural. So when we call Jerusalem, we mean, or the Hebrew is Jerusalem as in multiple.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Interesting. And it's in Hebrew, that's the only city that is referred to like in that multiple sense.
The only one. It's the only one in the world that I know of, and it's the only one that we have in the Bible. It's the only city like that in the Bible that has a pluralistic meaning to it in its name. And that's what makes Jerusalem significant. So if you understand the prophetic name, right, of Jerusalem, then we understand that what takes place in Jerusalem is reflecting something that's taking place in heaven, in the heavenly Jerusalem. And as many Christians believe, that one day they're going to go to what they call heaven, right?
Yeah.
Well, the term heaven is also one of those terms that kind of lost its meaning. Heaven is on earth.
Right.
There is a heaven on earth. And I know there are a lot of films that like to kind of pitch that idea, so to speak, people discuss, I went to Hawaii and this particular,
like heaven and earth.
It was like heaven on earth, So we use this term kind of very loosely and many times kind of in ignorance. But heaven really is on earth. And that heaven is Jerusalem. Because what's going to happen is, as far as we know, is that the heavenly Jerusalem one day is going to come down.
Right.
And it's going to basically restore and take over the physical Jerusalem that we know. And it's going to transform the whole
landscape.
The whole landscape.
Right.
You know, you have Ezekiel, right? And when he talks about the temple.
This massive temple.
It's massive. It takes up a huge landmass. It dwarfs the temples that used to stand here, etc. I mean, the land completely is going to change, and everything's going to be affected by that.
And for those that are watching that are kind of confused about the Ezekiel temple, it really it correlates with the Revelations temple, doesn't it?
Yes.
What it is.
Yes.
It does correlate. And
absolutely. The problem is, again, when Christians read the book of Revelation, they won't read it within the context necessarily of together with, let's say, Daniel,
right,
or Ezekiel and the other prophets, right? They won't necessarily kind of mix them. They kind of read the book of Revelation independently, like it's its own like it's its own revelation, when it's not. The book of Revelation, obviously it was a Jewish writer,
right?
Because you see all of the symbolism and the language that he uses is very much reflective of the prophetic discussion of the end times.
Right.
When heaven meets earth. And so you'll see that, and that's really the only way you're going to understand the book of Revelation, honestly.
Through the lens of the other scriptures, right?
Yes.
That's the only way to interpret it properly, correct?
Yes, which can also answer the question to many people, you know, many Christians who will read the book of Revelation and get discouraged and say, you know, this book is just way over my head. No, it's not. You can understand it. There are a lot of things in prophecy that are not necessarily meant for us to know now. In fact, most of prophetic scripture is not. It's not something that we're supposed to look at. And this is more the Jewish understanding, is you don't look at prophecy and say, oh, now I know what's going to happen. What we do is we look at prophecy differently than the most, you know, Christian streams, you know, where they try to write a book about it and so on. And those predictions seem to fail time and time again,
well,
which really frustrates many Christians, right? You know, many followers that followed that particular evangelist or prophet or preacher or whatever, and it just turns out that 20 years down the line, his predictions were just way off.
Right, yeah.
So the Jewish way is just to look at prophecy, and that when it starts to fulfill itself, then we can say, aha, we can see in, you know, Daniel, Ezekiel, Isaiah, you know, Zechariah, we can look at these prophets and what they spoke about this time and go, now it was fulfilled, basically, right?
Well, so we're living in some of those times, right? That even the Jewish people do not deny that it's prophecy fulfilled.
Yes,
correct?
absolutely,
and
exactly.
We're going to talk about that in the next segment.
Up next, ICEJ Canada Arise directors Philippe and Marysa Bedard.
Well, I'm here today with Phil and Marysa Bedard from Quebec, Montreal, actually. It's been such an honor to have you guys working with us, and you guys have both been recipients of our CISL Canada Israel Scholarship for young adults to go on the Arise Tour. You've both received it, but you've also been to Israel other times, once together, once separately. And just want to hear from you guys today how those experiences have impacted you, you know, maybe some of the things that surprised you, and really what you can tell young adults here in Canada about your experience in Israel. One of the things I wanted to ask you guys was, how did you first hear about the scholarship? Maybe Marysa, I'll ask you.
So I first heard about the scholarship through a friend of mine. Her name is Aquila. She was a friend that I went to school of ministry with at Catch the Fire. And she just randomly messaged me one day and said, hey, I thought about you. I think this would be a good opportunity for you to try to apply for and see what happens. And I applied and I ended up getting the scholarship.
Wow, and you've been involved with the ministry since which year again?
2014.
For 2014, so all this time.
Yeah.
And we're so blessed to have you, and I know in that time you met this handsome
did.
Quebecois young man, Philippe.
did.
Philippe, how did you hear about ICEJ? Well, I think it's pretty obvious to our viewers, but maybe tell us the first time that Marysa brought up ICEJ with you.
I heard about the CISL Arise scholarship through a friend of mine who's now my wife.
There you go.
So it's pretty much the same story, right? At first, she was sharing to me, basically, I met her when she just came back from Israel.
Okay.
And she kept talking to me about Israel and everything. And honestly, I had very little knowledge about Israel, about the conflict, about the plan of God for Israel. Although I was studying the Bible, I still had very little knowledge about this wonderful country. So I was kind of like a bit resistant at first. I was like, I don't know if I really want to go to Israel, I don't know, it's not really my thing. And eventually, last year actually, in 2017 or 20, in 2017 I ended up going, but before that, no, it was in 2018. So I went in 2018 for the first time. A couple months prior to the tour, there was the applications, and Marysa was like, Phil, like you should really apply for the scholarship to go to Israel. She told me, I'm pretty sure you would have it, considering that you're a leader in your church, you did Bible college and everything, and also like it would be very good for you to have this experience. And she was already the rep of Quebec in Canada, so obviously she wanted to get me on board with her and everything. So I went to Israel for the first time last year in 2018, and it was an amazing experience.
And you guys, for that trip, it was together for the first time,
yeah,
right?
it was together.
And you have been married now for how long?
2 years. We've been married for 2 years.
For 2 years.
Yeah.
Marysa, tell me, how was it for you experiencing Israel already, knowing what was it like, but knowing to bring your husband for the first time? Talk a little bit about those emotions, maybe some of the things that you experienced bringing Phil, your husband.
For sure. So as he explained, in the beginning, I would often talk to him about Israel and my heart for Israel. And I always felt like there was a bit of a disconnect, like he didn't fully grasp what I was saying. And I would talk about my experience, about the tour, and how it did impact my heart on a very deep level, especially for prayer for Israel.
Right.
And this time around, when he actually got on board with wanting to apply, and then he gets accepted, I was super excited because I felt like it was an opportunity for us to connect on a deeper level as well in regards to Israel and just my heart for Israel also becoming his heart too.
Great.
In a real practical way, since he would be there walking the land.
Now, what were you most excited to have Phil see with you when you got into the land?
I don't know. I didn't really have a specific thing. I felt like everything I was just wanting him to see. But I felt in my heart that the garden tomb would be something that he would really appreciate and be touched by, and he was actually.
Wonderful.
And just in general, like the culture, I was really excited about him experiencing that and just being in a new place that he's never experienced before.
Well, great. Well, we got a picture of when you guys first visited the garden tomb together.
Yeah, that's true.
And so you got, your beard's a little bit shorter there, Phil, but it looks like an awesome time. Phil, why don't you let us know about the fact that you didn't grow up in a Christian home.
Yeah.
Right. You got saved in your late teens, young adult years, right?
Yeah, I got saved at I would say 22 years old. More specifically, like I started being interested in the Bible, and I started to be interested by God and everything at the age of 21, but it actually ended up surrendering my whole life to Jesus Christ at 22 years old. Yeah.
So you have this amazing salvation experience, a new life in Christ, a beautiful wife. You guys are now walking, this biblical foundational life. Then you find yourself in Israel. How did that impact your walk with God?
Well, I would say I went through Bible college. I studied the scriptures a lot. Studied a bit of the Israel's geography and everything, and it feels like when you're actually in the land of Israel, you kind of see the Bible through a different lens, if I can say it that way. You really connect to the stories of the Bible on a deeper level, because you're actually walking in those places where Jesus actually like called his disciples, walked on water, where Jesus was crucified, where Jesus was buried, where Jesus was resurrected. And I feel like it's a very powerful thing to actually not only read on pages, but actually see those places with your eyes. It actually makes your faith more alive, I would say. Like, for an example, when I was on the Sea of Galilee, on the boat ride on the Sea of Galilee, it just hit me. I was like, this is the place where Jesus' ministry was like first started, literally. Like he actually went about and called his disciples, his very first disciples. He called them where? On the shores of the Sea of Galilee. They were fishing, and then Jesus comes and just changed their lives completely. And also like stories where Jesus walked on water, like all those miracles. It's like really powerful to just witness the places where all of it took place.
Well, it's surreal. It comes to life, right, guys?
Yeah.
We so appreciate being able to like talk and get into these deep things with you, and we look forward to continue the conversation. I still have some more questions for you, but that's all for today, and we'll come back with the Bedards again.
Up next, Donna Holbrook talks to Canadian musician and composer Ruth Fazal on living in Jerusalem.
I'm here at the top of Zion Square in Jerusalem with my dear friend Ruth Fazal. She's a composer, a violinist. And Ruth has been living here in Jerusalem for a period of time. And I want to ask Ruth, why are you, as an evangelical Christian, what was the inspiration behind you coming here in the first place?
Well, definitely a God thing. Nothing I would have ever imagined myself doing, being here. It started probably about 10, 11 years ago with a book of poetry of children from the Holocaust. And that's when I had felt God asking me to take some of these poems and weave them together with the scriptures to create a piece of music talking about God's heart. And I, at that time, didn't realize what God was doing, but it just, as the time went on, he did something in my heart as I was writing about these children, and I was writing the music and putting their songs to music and putting it with portions of the scriptures. And at the end of it was about 2.5, 3 years, and I realized that God had actually done something in my heart in that period of time. And now here was a people in my heart, Israel, and I couldn't do anything about it. It was too late. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to, I think, feel the feelings, the emotions of God towards his people. And that's the beginning. That was the beginning of it all. You could have thought, well, that's the end of it all, because I finished the piece, I wrote the piece, we performed the piece in Canada.
The Toronto Center for the Arts.
You were there, and then it went to Europe.
And tell us about Europe, that the performances you found out were in fact in the very places that Hitler had proclaimed.
Yeah, that was really amazing. It was like,
the date, right?
it really, we realized that, pretty soon we realized that we were actually on a tour that was really, it was an intercession. That each place we were at, there was a date that coincided. Like, for instance, when we did it in Prague, it was on the exact same date in history, and the concert started at the same time as Hitler gave his speech from the Prague,
and that
from the
wasn't
castle
known
in
to you
Prague.
until after the
No,
fact.
none of it was known until after
And
the
then
fact.
you brought it to Israel.
And same thing happened in Israel.
And we helped to bring the Holocaust survivors
Yeah,
out to
you
here.
did. That's
it's
right.
Oratorio Terrazen, and it's a recording that you can get.
Yeah,
It was beautiful.
they were. We gave free tickets for all of the
Yes.
concerts, both in Canada, Europe, and Israel. Free tickets to Holocaust survivors, and I know ICEJ helped bring a bus to the performance. It was the premiere performance in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and we didn't know when we were setting it up, but it turned out to be Holocaust Memorial Day on that year.
Really?
I was just incredible. It was kind of those things that only God can do. And
So Ruth, about 2 years ago, you came here to Jerusalem. You studied Hebrew.
Yes.
I know your teacher is Gil.
Yes.
He's a modern Orthodox. Tell me about your relationship and what it's like for you to live in amongst Israel.
Yeah, well, I thought I was coming for a year, but God had other things in mind. Christian, you know, you hear all the time, oh, Judaism, it's just all about the law. You know, they do what the rabbis tell them. It's just about the law. There's no relationship, and I started to realize this is not true. And I'm seeing a young man who has a really deep relationship with God. Everything about his life is about God. And so we started having conversations, and it's been really, really special. He helped me do my first CD of Hebrew songs, which I recorded here. And then last year, we actually, the result of all our conversations and discussions, and all in Hebrew, I may add,
You're pretty good.
we did a film together, because we really wanted to I wanted to open a window for the church, for us as believers in Yeshua, and say, look at this, feel this, feel God's heart here, and we so need to come humbly. We need a lot of humility, and to realize just what we have in so many ways thrown away, and what we are. If we can have relationship without agenda,
Exactly.
if we can do that, then we can begin to really walk alongside each other and gain from one another the riches. I mean, I don't think it's just. Gil would say it's not just one-sided. And so it's been really, really special. So we ended up making this film called Between Heaven and Earth. And the film's finished, but right now it's not released yet. But it's a window. It's a window onto Gil's world, sort of through my journey. And then we do meetings here in Israel for believers, for Christians coming to Israel, to Jerusalem especially. And we'll do an evening with them where I have a conversation with Gil.
And would be with Christians, a Christian group, do you have a Jewish group?
At this point, it's just Christians. Gil's got his mind on taking it to his own people. But at this point, Christians are coming. But many, they come, they do the sites, they maybe meet believers here, but they never really, they don't have an opportunity to talk to somebody like Gil as an Orthodox Jew. And it's really amazing.
Hi, I'm Donna Holbrook, National Executive Director of the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem, Canada. Audrey Ruth Peer was one of our members who came to know about the work of the ICEJ in bringing comfort here, and she passed away as an only child and with no children of her own. She had two regrets in her life. One was that she didn't have children, and the other one that she never came to the land of Israel. So when she passed away, she left an estate. I shared it with her friend Pat, who knew her for over 60 years. And I said, Pat, what do you think Audrey would like, how we use her funds? So music was important to her, children also important to her. And so we undertook the fund and we divided it 4 ways equally. And it went to a petting zoo for children, for orphan boys near Tel Aviv. It also went to build 2 new music rooms at Bet Yosef up at Haifa, which is a very large community center. We also helped to complete a playground for another orphanage to the south of Israel. And then it enabled us to restore our scholarship for Christian young adults. And even though she was never in Israel, her name is in the land on those 3 projects, and it continued for 5 years on our Canadian scholarship for Christian leaders who have never been to Israel, who are in the age group of 17 to 30. Would you consider being a shomer, keeper of Israel, in your state giving? And that leaves a wonderful legacy here in Israel.
We conclude our program today with some sights and sounds within Israel.
The youngest was David. Probably because the high priest always sacrificed lamb for the temple. So the shepherds have to take care of the lamb. What they used to do with the lamb? Some being shepherds, they used to break the little lamb. Why? So they can stay, not to move.
Thank you for joining us today, and be sure to visit our website at www.icejcanada.tv or call us at 1-866-324-9133. And for our Canadian residents, be sure to ask for your free Canada-Israel pin. Through your contributions to ICEJ Canada, you can participate by giving to Haifa Home for Holocaust Survivors, Women at Risk Red Carpet Project, Operation Life Shield Bomb-Proof Shelters, Mentoring Programs, Aliyah Support, Children's Projects, Israel in Crisis, Israel Aid, Magan David Adam Emergency Services, Christian Friends of Yad Vashem, Scholarships for Young Adult Leaders, ICEJ Canada Media Fund, Gift Estate Securities Fund.